Welcome to part 4 of our cropping series. If you haven't watched the other 3 parts, please, I encourage you to do so. Otherwise, this one won't make any sense. All right, so where we left off is here, where we have this misalignment between the cropper and the container. And I think that actually came up because of where we are resetting the image from. So just simply move this reset part to the bottom, so that we reset after we set these values. Then we reset the image. That should sort the problem out. So let me refresh and the problem is sorted. Then we can go back and actually remove this border solid on the container, because it will give us some problems when calculating the position of these things. So when I do that, and there we are. So we have a very nice thingy going on here. You can move the image around like that, which is pretty nice. Refresh, and it comes back to that. All right, so this is all nice and good. Now what we need to do is add a zoom feature so that we can actually zoom this image around. So let's do that now. So let me go to right after the container, let me add an input of type range. Okay, so as soon as I do this, this range creates this control. So that's the control called range, which is pretty nice. So now here I want to, I don't need to give it a name, excuse me. So I can set the minimum value of this thing to 10, and then I'm going to set the maximum value to 40. All right, so why these figures is because what I actually need is 1 to 4. Because what I want to do is to be able to zoom this image to 4 times its original size. Now, the reason I didn't use 1 and 4 is because if I just use 1 and 4 like this, it's going to only have 4 positions to move, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So this will be very jagged. I wanted to still move in between those. So that's why I added more numbers in between the two. So 10 and 40 is pretty cool. So if you want to be able to zoom this to 5 or 6 times, just change this appropriately. If I put 80 here, then I'll be able to zoom it up to 8 times. Okay, so we are done with that. Let me give it an ID though, so I can style it. I'll give it an ID of range for simplicity's sake. So let me go up here and add range to that part and say width should be equal to 400 pixels like the container. And then let me say margin, let me give it a margin of auto. Now it won't move in the center because its display is set to inline. So I'll set this to block instead. Okay, so that should successfully enlarge it and move it to the center. So let's refresh. All right, so there we are. Let's add a break so that there's some space. These guys can give each other some space. Okay, let's go back, refresh, and there's some space. So now I can move this left to right, and it should be able to zoom the image. So let's try and have that done. So let me create a function here that will handle that. Just before reset, let's add another function called resize image, right? Let's do that. Resize image. So in order to resize this image, what we want to do is say image dot width. Let's design the width. That style actually dot width is equal to whatever the value of range is, range dot value. Oh, I just remembered that we haven't declared range in our JavaScript. So let me go up here and duplicate one of these lines and copy and say range like that. So now it's declared. So let's go back here. Range dot value, the value of range divided by 10. Now the reason we are dividing this value of range by 10 is so that we have the single digit number instead of the 10. So if, let's say for example, it's 10, it will be 1. If it's 20, it will be 2 instead. That's what we need. We need a small number. Okay, so range divided by 10. Now the thing is, we need to know the original width of this image, what it starts with. Okay, and also on the reset here, reset image down here, once we reset the image, we have to be able to set the range to 0 as well, to the minimum value. So range.value is equal to 10. Let's add that so that the range, if this was in the middle, when you reset the image, it goes back to the beginning. Okay, so that's that. And then we need to know also the initial size of the image. This is after the resize, after the reset. So down here, just after we reset, let's put a variable and say image. Let's say something more descriptive like original image width. I don't know if that's just more descriptive, is equal to image.client width. Okay, let's do the same thing for original image height. Image.client height. Okay, so that we know what we are starting with and we can use that for reference. So let's go down here and say, back to the resize part, and say whatever this number is, multiply by the image, original image, this is the width, original image width, like that. So we're multiplying the original. So let's say, for example, the range is equal to 40, which is the maximum. So 40 divided by 10 comes to 4. So 4 times original image width is going to multiply the image 4 times its original width and height. So let's just do the same thing for height as well. Divide by 10 original image height. Okay, so this should do it, actually. So now we call this this image resize on the mouse move of the range. So let's go to the range here. We're not putting it on change because change only happens. Okay, let's try and put it on change so that we see why that is a disadvantage. So let's say resize the image event. So on the change, whenever the value changes of this thing, it sets the resize, it resizes the image. So let's see if that's actually going to happen. So let me move that, and you see the image is changing. However, you only see it change after I let go of the control, which is not what we want. So what we want is to see this in real time. So we're going to change this from on change to on mouse move, so that as long as the mouse is moving over the control, we see some changes. Yeah, so let's do that. So while I'm still holding this, I can still see the changes happening, which is pretty good. Now, if you notice one thing, this image is being resized from the top corner here, not from the center. We want it to resize from the center, kind of. So that is not really possible, but what we could do is we can cheat and trick it so that as we are resizing, because it's growing in the x-axis, so as it grows this way, we also move the image the opposite way. As it grows down, we also move the image up. This will give the illusion that we're actually zooming in from the center. So let's try and do that. Excuse me. So let's go to the resize here. We have to know how much we have actually changed the image. Okay, then once we know how much we've changed the image, then we can move the image in the opposite direction by half that amount. Okay, so let me start by saying var h, or let's say w, is equal to image dot client width. Okay, so we are getting the width of the image before we change anything. So let me do that h, and client height as well. All right, so let me repeat these guys down here. So we get the values and then we change the image and then we get the values after. So we're going to name these W2, H2. Now, if there's a difference between this one and this one, it means the image has actually been resized. So we should move the image in the opposite direction to make sure that it's centered. So let's say if W minus W2 is not equal to 0, this will be how we tell that something has moved. Otherwise, if I subtract the same number, it's going to be 0. So if it's not 0, then something has moved. The size of the image has actually changed. So in order to see what we should do is, let's create a value, a variable called difference. Let's say var diff is equal to w minus w2, so that we know how much we have actually moved in the width. So let's also do the same thing. Let me put diff2 and see how much we've moved in the height as well. How many pixels we've moved in the height. So now, since we know the amount of pixels we've moved, what we need to do is divide those by 2 and then move in the opposite direction. So let's just do the division right here. Let me put these in brackets and say divided by 2, and do the same thing here, divide by 2, so that we move in the opposite direction. So what we're going to say now is that image dot style dot left, okay, is going to be image dot style. Actually, we can't use style dot left because it's got that pixel thing. We can't use it for math. So instead, we're going to use the client, not actually the client, of the offset left of the image. But since the image is inside the container, we have to subtract the container dot offset as well, offset left, like that. So what we've done here, this is the current left position of the image. So we have to add our diff to this, like that. So let me do the same thing for the top, like that. Let me change this one to top. And we're using diff2, since diff2 is the difference of the heights. All right, so let's see how that works so far. Let me refresh the image and let me do this. Okay, so as you can see, we are creating the illusion that we are zooming in from the center, kind of. Okay, this is very good, very, very awesome. I love it. All right, so far so good. Now what we need to do, as you can see in the original original project, we need to be able to see some extra parts, because here once we are cropping, let's say we are cropping this area right here, we can't see what we are cropping out. So I want us to be able to see a little bit of what we are cropping out as well while we crop this image. So I want to limit the movement of the image to a certain area here. Another problem we have is that if I move the image out of the way like this, I'll end up cropping an empty area. So we have to make sure that this is actually avoidable. So the image should not move too far off out here. So in order to do that, let's add something in the mouse move here, something to limit the movement of these X and Y. So what we can do is to check if the X has gone too far, and then we bring it back to the normal before we assign it to the image. So in this case, I want to have at least a 50 pixel margin here on every side to make sure that the image can't go any further than that. So that 50% margin, let's say on the left, for example, if I move it this way, if the left becomes greater than 50 pixels, it should stop. So let's set a margin. Let's set it up here and say var margin is equal to 50. So 50 is our limit. If you want to increase or decrease the margin, you do it from here. So let me go down here and confirm if the X, let's add an if statement. Let's say if X, actually to start with, before I even do this, when we reset the image here, we're supposed to take into consideration also the margin that we've created. So it shouldn't go all the way up and all the way down. So let's go first and deal with the reset image when we are resetting the image to start with. So down here we have our ratio, we know the height, and we know the top. So the top, instead, we're going to set it to margin. All right, that way when we start, it gives off that margin there, which is nice. And then what we're going to do with the left is actually here we don't deal with this, we just leave it on margin there. What we need to do though is take the height as well. With the height, we have to take the margin into consideration. So instead of having this go to the maximum of the container, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the margin from the height so that the height is a little bit smaller now. Now the problem is the margin is in two places, on the top and on the bottom, so we have to multiply that margin by 2. So let me go and multiply the margin by 2 like that, so that the height like that, so that we have a margin on top and below. But now we've squished the image, so to avoid that squishing we have to do the same on the width. So container there, before we multiply by the ratio, we're supposed to subtract our margin from there. So let me put this one here, put some more inverted commas here like that, and then multiply by the ratio. So let's refresh, and there we go. So pretty good. Now we have a limit at the top and at the bottom. Okay, but still, if I move this around, it goes all the way out. So now let's go and deal with that while moving around. Let's go. All right, actually even the center here, extra. Let's see, do I need to do this here? Because container width is no longer container width now. All right, we'll leave that for now. Let me go up here and say resize image. No, not on the resize, but on the mouse move. Okay, so here we're going to check if X is greater than margin. Okay, if that is true, then we say X is equal to margin. This will successfully limit how far the X can go. So let's test that theory. I have the X here, and if I try to go any further, I am limited. No matter how much I drag this, it's not moving. Okay, so we have successfully limited that. Let's do that for the top as well. Let me copy that and say Y. Okay, as well, Y is greater than margin, same thing. So I can't go any lower here. I can go up, but I can't go any lower. I can't go any lower that way. This will avoid cropping an empty space. Okay, now let's do it the same for this way. If I go this way, I can go completely out of this page, which is not recommended. This image should not go beyond this point, because we need an image in the center here. So in order to figure that out, we need to say container width. Okay, so let's see how we do this. If the left of the image, actually, let me see. Let me figure this out. Let's create an X limit though. X limit in the other side is equal to, okay, container width. Let's try that container.client width minus image dot client width minus margin, because we have to take the margin into consideration. So that's what the X limit is equal to. So now let's put another if statement here. If we say if X is greater, or if X is less than, actually is less than X limit, what we do is we say X is equal to X limit. So let's confirm it works before we do the Y. So let me go this way and try to move it this way, and as you can see, I am being limited this way. I'm being limited at the top, limited this way, limited that way, except the bottom. So let's fix the bottom as well. So we just have to copy these, duplicate, and convert them to Y's. So we're going to say Y limit, excuse me. Let's use height here and height there as well. Awesomeness. Okay, so let me refresh, and as you can see, I can't move anymore beyond the limits of this thing. This is pretty cool now. Now, because I have set all those limits as well, I need to set them when zooming in as well, because if I zoom in like this, okay, there we are zooming in and zoom back out, I may end up missing the limits. So what I need to actually do is repeat this limiting thing on the resize as well. dot left. Okay, let's go back here. What are we doing? X and Y. All right, so we need to repeat exactly this. Let me copy this just in case. Let me go to where is this resize image? Okay, there we are. So before this part here, let me add those, copy those and add them there. Now, in order for this to work, we need to have X and Y values. So X and Y, in this case, this is the X. So let me just put X, replace that with X, and go here and say var X is equal to that. Okay, the same thing for the Y. We're going to say var Y is equal to, and then we can check for all these things down here and until we assign them. So let's see if we haven't broken anything. Let me resize. Okay, we're still resizing just fine. Let me move this around. Move this around. There we go. There we go. Yeah, the limits are still being obeyed no matter what we do. Let me go down this way. Limits have been obeyed. Limits have been obeyed. All right, so this is pretty cool for now. Everything has been worked out. So when we come back in the next part, we're going to see how we actually do the cropping, because now we have all the information we need. And also we need to have a space here that that tells us where we are cropping, where the margin is, because when I zoom in like this, it's difficult to see where the margin is because it's 50 pixels here. So we need something to show us that. All right, so I'll see you in the incoming video. Leave a like, a comment, whatever it is, and I'll appreciate it.